Toronto is walking a tight line today between spring warmth and winter hazards, while Ottawa is talking about faster approvals for big projects. And national security debates are shifting toward what Canada can and can't do with your data. Later in the brief, we'll come back to a Toronto event next week that's becoming a timely lens on privacy, power, and a new federal bill. This morning in the GTA, the practical story is the ground under your feet. Environment Canada has had freezing rain warnings and special weather statements up across Toronto and much of the GTA, with the main message being, even a thin glaze can make sidewalks and ramps unexpectedly slick. At the same time, temperatures are pushing into the mild range today, near 13 degrees, with rain around, and visibility has dropped at points in the region. If you're out early, the pattern to watch is changing conditions block to block. Lake-adjacent areas can skew wetter, while inland pockets can still freeze up. The bigger weekend concern is what comes after the ice. Multiple rounds of rain, combined with melting snowpack, can raise flood and ponding risk, especially where drains are still clogged by slush. If you live near a creek or low-lying road, it's worth treating that as a check-it-twice weekend. A quick scan of Ontario police headlines. Investigators in Durham say a long-running workplace fraud case at a cleaning company involved more than $3 million, with 8 people charged and more suspects still being sought. York police have also charged a Toronto man in what they describe as a multi-million-dollar investment fraud. And there's a separate GTA corruption investigation involving both civilians and police that investigators say connects to a string of shootings in Vaughan. Those allegations have not been tested in court. Turning to sports, Toronto's 2 big questions are roster direction and health. For the Maple Leafs, the trade deadline conversation is still about what success looks like, not one specific target, but how management balances immediate help against what they're willing to give up. If you're a fan tracking this, the key thing to watch is less the rumor of the hour, and more the type of asset Toronto is shopping or protecting. And for the Raptors, they're heading into Minnesota after a rough stretch, and the immediate watch is availability. Brandon Ingram is listed as questionable with a thumb sprain. The brighter signal has been Emmanuel Quickley, who's been playing his best stretch of the season, giving Toronto a clearer path to competitive nights, even against teams higher in the standings. Now, let's shift to the main thread: policy decisions that can quietly change how power works in Canada. Here's what's happening. A group at the university-based research lab Citizen Lab is flagging what it sees as serious rights and privacy risks in the direction of a proposed federal bill, Bill C-2, especially when that bill is placed in the wider context of international data sharing tools. Citizen Lab's preliminary analysis connects the bill to 2 big frameworks used in cross-border data access. One is the second additional protocol to the Budapest Convention, a treaty instrument aimed at smoother cooperation in cybercrime investigations across countries. The other is the United States Cloud Act, which can compel companies to provide data even when it is held outside the U.S., depending on the circumstances. The key point is not that these instruments are inherently illegitimate. The point is that when domestic law expands investigative powers, and then those powers plug into international sharing arrangements, the practical reach of government access can expand fast, and oversight and constitutional guardrails may not keep pace. Citizen Lab's warning, put plainly, is that Bill C-2's proposed powers could increase risks to rights and privacy, and that the constitutional and human rights questions get sharper when you consider how data can move across borders, between governments, and through companies that operate globally. Why this matters now. Canada's politics is in a period where security, cybercrime, and foreign interference remain high salience issues. And when governments move to modernize powers in those areas, the fight often turns on definitions and process. What counts as necessary access? What counts as proportional? Who authorizes it and who audits it afterward? The risk here is a familiar one in modern tech governance. A policy designed for one purpose, say investigating serious crime, can over time become an infrastructure that enables much broader surveillance or chilling effects on expression, especially if rules are vague and accountability is slow. And that brings us to the forward reference from the opening. On Thursday, March 12th at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, Osgoode Law School is hosting the launch of a new book by Jonathon Penney, a law professor and Citizen Lab senior research fellow. The book is titled Chilling Effects, Repression, Conformity, and Power in the Digital Age. The reason this event is landing with extra relevance this week is its core claim that technology and power don't just enable monitoring, they can shape behavior, nudging people toward conformity because they assume they're being watched, flagged, or judged by systems they can't see. The panel includes Citizen Labs director Ron Dybert, senior research associate Kate Robertson, and law professor Neil Richards. If you're trying to make sense of how a bill becomes real-life consequences, that's the kind of conversation that often clarifies the stakes, not abstract privacy, but the day-to-day effects on speech, organizing, journalism, and ordinary online life. A quick national add-on that connects to this same theme of state capacity. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister has been pressing NATO to build a more permanent posture in the Arctic, while NATO leadership is also reiterating support for Ukraine, even as attention is pulled toward a Middle East-linked crisis. It's another reminder that security policy is expanding, geographically and technologically, at the same time that domestic rules about data and surveillance are being debated. Before we close, one more thread to keep an eye on out west. In Alberta, doctors' groups and advocacy organizations are urging Ottawa to review Alberta's Bill 11, arguing it could expand private health care in ways that violate the Canada Health Act. Alberta says the changes are meant to modernize practice rules and reduce waits. That dispute is heading toward a familiar federal-provincial test: how far provinces can go, and when the federal government chooses to enforce national standards. The final piece to watch this weekend is the weather's second act. After the slippery start, it's the combination of rain and melt that can create localized flooding and poor driving conditions, especially overnight and near waterways. If you're traveling, build in extra time and expect conditions to change quickly. That's the brief for Saturday, March 7th. I'll be watching how the Bill C2 debate gets framed next, as a narrow legal question or as a broader question about how digital power is governed in Canada.